So you guys live in the big city and you're thinking about moving away. Well, here's the things that you need to know before you consider moving to Utah.
Why would I go to Utah?
Hi there, I'm Scott Walters with Best USA Realty, and this is my Living in Utah YouTube channel. I've lived in Utah for 45 of my 52 years.
And I'm Valerie Walters, and I've lived in Utah for 47 years.
The first thing you need to know about living in Utah is that northern and southern Utah have two different climates. Northern Utah can be really cold and get a lot of snow in the winter, and southern Utah can be really hot in the summer, but on the other hand, it can be quite pleasant in the winter.
So the other thing that I'd say that they don't tell you about when you're thinking of Utah is northern Utah and southern Utah are two completely different landscapes. So northern Utah, well, it looks like this. You've got all these beautiful high mountains, beautiful pine trees. It's much cooler, but when you think of southern Utah, that's where you're thinking of all the red rocks. So you're thinking of Zions National Park or Bryce Canyon or the Moab area. That's where you see all the red rocks and the desert area. So two completely different areas. In fact, from northern Utah to southern Utah, you're probably about a 3-hour difference too. So there's quite a bit of space that separate those two areas. All right, guys. So one of the other things that people don't tell you about when it comes to Utah is it's pretty expensive, particularly along the Wasatch Front, which runs from basically Brigham City down to Nephi. I can't tell you how many times I'll get somebody who's not really familiar with Utah and they think, well, that's a smaller state out in the west. Prices must be small, but they're not. I have people call up and say, hey, I'd love to get 5 acres for $100,000 and build a house for that too. Well, you could have done that maybe 30 or 40 years ago, but not now. The home prices, in fact, our median home price, I believe, is approaching $600,000 just for the median home price along the Wasatch Front. So it's actually pretty expensive here in northern Utah.
So northern Utah has expensive urban and suburban areas. Some rural areas may offer more affordable land options. Southern Utah has high property prices in popular areas like St. George. It does have smaller lots in the urban settings.
So also when we talk about rural areas, we're not really talking anywhere along the Wasatch Front. We're talking you're getting off the Wasatch Front. You're either going out west in the West Desert. Yeah, land will be much cheaper out there, but a lot of that land's not even buildable, so you're not going to live there. But even some of the smaller counties like Juab County, Sanpete County, down by the Price area, Millard County, Beaver County. Those are the counties that you'll find some rural property, maybe some more affordable prices, but then you will be hours away from the Wasatch Front and all the amenities that living along the Wasatch Front offers.
So now we're going to touch on rural life away from the Wasatch Front. For amenities, you're going to have fewer amenities compared to urban areas, limited shopping, dining, and entertainment options. And for services, you could have poor cell and internet service in some areas, and this could be very important if you work at home. And essential services may be less accessible there too. And you can have a slower paced lifestyle.
And I would just add that generally your traffic is a whole lot less out in the rural areas. You get into the cities, it can be pretty busy. Now, one misconception maybe you've heard about Utah is the whole entire population is Mormon.
Oh, great. Mormons.
Or in other words, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but that really is a myth nowadays. The population of Utah is around 3.3 million, and 62% of the population is LDS, but some of the latest studies show that only 42% of the people actually identify as LDS. That means there's a big chunk of people that are on the rolls or the records of the church, but they're not active or don't even consider themselves members of the church. So it's not quite as Mormon.
I'm afraid it was the Mormons.
As you think it is. There's a lot of people from all different walks of life that live in Utah, particularly in Salt Lake City and Salt Lake Valley. Is definitely way more diverse there. As you start moving into some of the outlying counties and rural counties, there'll definitely be a little heavier tilt on the population towards people that are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it does affect the culture here in Utah. Like the liquor laws are kind of strict because members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints don't drink alcohol. It also can affect like Sunday shopping, as a lot of people believe in not shopping on Sunday. So it affects things like that, but overall it's not really that much different than anywhere else. Okay, one other thing you might want to know about if you're moving to Utah, especially if you're moving here from big city somewhere and you don't see a lot of wildlife in the city, You can definitely have wildlife here in Utah, especially if you live in some of these foothill or these communities that are up in the foothills. I'm up in a community called Woodland Hills, sold a home here a number of years ago, and just for fun, the homeowner would put a trail camera up in his backyard, and he had documented black bear, cougar, elk, deer, turkey, all coming through his yard up here in Woodland Hills. And sometimes occasionally we'll hear about like a moose running through Salt Lake City or Provo, or you definitely have deer all over running through all the communities, whether you're up in the foothills or not. So just something to be aware of. If you're moving to Utah, you're going to see a lot of wildlife, and even in the cities.
Also, if you have trees or a garden and you live in certain areas, you're going to need to take precautions like putting up fencing around your yard or your garden. And also, deer can jump fences, so you might have to put like wires around your trees and garden to protect it. You just have to think about these things so your garden or trees aren't ruined by wildlife. Another thing about wildlife is that you need to protect your pets when you live in the foothills or mountain areas of Utah. Little animals like cats and dogs can get eaten by cougars or coyotes, so you just want to make sure to take the precautions to protect them. And also, you need to watch out for wildlife so you don't hit them and destroy your car.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, we saw like 10 to 12 deer just driving up here, so watch out so you don't run over the deer. So I remember one time before we had fences up in our yard, you remember that time we had that skunk that came running right down our fence line? Way back in the beginning when we first lived there. So yeah, you're going to have some wildlife encounters here in Utah.
And we did have, was that a deer in our backyard?
Yeah.
It was like a 5-point deer in our backyard before. We had fences around the yard, but not on the sides of the yard. So it must have just walked right down the side of our house, and it just plopped down in the backyard and stayed there for a few hours.
I swear he was like drunk on our rotten apples, eating all the rotten apples on the ground.
Probably was. So we have hot summers in Utah, and this can increase the wildfire risk due to all the dry conditions. Things get really dry, and it makes it easy for fires to happen with lightning strikes or people target shooting. And we get multiple wildfires each summer, and it has a real impact on air quality and outdoor activities. It's not very fun to be outside when the air is really dirty.
Okay, so Valerie was talking about it can be real dry. Look at this behind me. So in the springtime, all this grass is really green and beautiful, but as soon as it gets hot, it just turns to this yellow kindling that just can be sparked up with lightning or a discarded cigarette butt or whatever it might be, and just boom, the whole mountainside's on fire. So just be aware, if you're living especially in one of these mountainside communities like where we're at today, you can actually expect that it's just a matter of when, not if, that you'll experience a forest fire. In 2018, this community, you can see behind me, had a massive wildfire, and fortunately, due to the heroic efforts of all the firefighters, no homes were lost, and they were able to get that fire to stop just right here, right where this community began, and nothing was lost. But they had to evacuate. How many weeks were they out of their homes?
Probably 3 weeks.
Yeah, it was several.
It was really scary for everybody.
Oh, and this whole valley, let's turn around just so you can see this valley. This whole entire valley was full of smoke. You couldn't see anything. In fact, even just last week, it was full of smoke from wildfires hundreds of miles away from here. And so you're going to deal with that, particularly when you're in the Intermountain West. Perhaps if you live somewhere else, you're not going to deal with that the way that we do. But here in the Intermountain West, we deal with forest fires. Okay, when we're talking Utah, you guys got to know that it snows here in the wintertime. I know it wouldn't look like it from today because everything's green. It's beautiful. It's a hot August afternoon, but give it 3 months, and where we're at right now could have 3 or 4 feet of snow on it. So be prepared to deal with the snow. When you're thinking of snow, it means winter driving. You got to be prepared for that. You may want to consider getting studs on your tires so you can drive, because the roads ice up.
Yeah. And I also would suggest if you live like up in the foothills or up where we are in Woodland Hills, I would definitely have 4-wheel drive.
Unless we die in this icy mountain road.
The roads are very steep, and there's no way I would drive up here without 4-wheel drive.
You're right. I wouldn't live in this community without 4-wheel drive. There could be some days where you wouldn't make it back home if you didn't have 4-wheel drive. Also, I highly recommend if you move here, considering having a snow blow machine or a 4-wheeler. with snowplow blade on it, just so that you can push the snow a little more easy. Saves your back from all that shoveling.
And gets you out of your driveway.
So one thing I forgot to mention is Utah does a good job with moving the snow on the freeways. They've got snow plows. They're going to spread salt and sand on the roads to get the snow to melt, but that means that oftentimes you can have rusting that takes place under your car because of all that salt and sand on the road. But another nice thing about our winters is we're not as cold as maybe some of the surrounding states like Montana or Idaho. So oftentimes during the day, if we have a big snowstorm, oftentimes that snow will at least melt off the roads. But there are some winters where it's cold enough, like in the subdivisions, the snow will stay iced up on your road in your subdivision for months.
Right. Neighborhoods that don't get plowed often can be choppy like potholes, but it's just snow buildup.
Yeah, pretty bumpy driving.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about what we normally don't ever talk about on this channel, which is politics. We definitely just try to keep it neutral in that category. But if you're moving to Utah, you got to understand that the majority of the state is quite conservative. It is oftentimes called a red state, and it does pretty much vote for, on the red side of things, on the conservative side of things. But Salt Lake itself is considered kind of a blue island, especially Salt Lake City. And so that's a little more liberal, yeah. So just be aware of that. I mean, a lot of the people here, especially when you get more in the rural areas, they're very conservative, and they don't really like people coming from out of state with the big city liberal ideas trying to change their way of life, and they'll voice that displeasure. They'll be very nice, but they won't like that a lot of liberal ideas are coming here. I remember here in our little town a couple of years ago, a lady moved down from Seattle, and I guess in that area, whatever school district she was in, they had what do you call those?
Uniforms.
Yeah, uniforms. And she thought it would be a good idea that our schools here have uniforms. And somehow, did she get it put on some sort of ballot or petition, or what was it?
I think people got a vote, and the majority voted no.
And they were not happy.
They were very mad about it. They didn't like her bringing this big city idea to our small town.
Yeah, they weren't thrilled with that. Everybody just wanted to be able to dress how they wanted to dress and not be forced to wear a uniform. When it comes to values here in Utah, it is considered a very conservative state. All right, finally, I just want to talk about the population distribution of Utah. A lot of people don't realize that the vast majority of Utah's 3.3 million people, I think it's 85% of them, live along what's called the Wasatch Front. The Wasatch Front also, I learned in Utah history as like a 7th grader going here, is called the Fertile Strip. So it was the area of Utah that's the most fertile, most conducive to have larger populations, because you've got water and rivers that come running out of the large Wasatch Mountains, and most of those flow west, and that's what flows into and forms like Utah Lake and the Great Salt Lake. And so that Wasatch Front runs basically from Brigham City on the north to even Nephi on the south. That's about 120 miles or so, and most of the population along that Wasatch Front is basically within a 15-mile wide swath. There's maybe a few other areas where it's a little wider than that, but for the most part, it's actually pretty narrow. So once you get outside of that Wasatch Front, then you start getting into very rural areas, and that's where the rural parts of Utah are. But yeah, the vast majority of Utahns live within 15 miles or so of the Wasatch Front.
So there's other population centers. You have Logan in the northeast and St. George in the southwest. So basically a little bit at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom.
And pretty much everything in between is really wide open. Like if you ever drive from Salt Lake down to St. George, you're going to have a couple hours where you're looking out all around you, and there's like nothing but a few farmhouses here and there. Very rural, very sparsely populated in those areas outside the Wasatch Front.
I think it's nice to have that diversification of land. I actually like driving through the wide open spaces where it's like there's nothing here. Yeah, it's nice.
That is nice. That's why we live here. We love it. It still has a rural feel in a lot of areas. Yeah. Hey guys, I hope you have found this video helpful on what it's like living here in Utah. And if you want to know more about what it's like living here in the winter, or what it's like living here as a non-Mormon in Utah, I'll make sure to add those videos to the end of this video, and you feel free to click on those videos and watch them.
Please like, subscribe, and tap on that notification bell to get notified every time we come out with a new video.
Hey, and if you're thinking of buying or selling here in Utah, we want to help you, but we can't help you if you don't reach out to us. So reach out to us for a free consultation. Give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email. And with that, we'll catch you on the next video.